Welcome to Below the Line with Dr. Bennie L. Harris. The Chancellor of the University of South Carolina Upstate talks with top leaders about issues such as change, technology, education, and leadership. Please enjoy.
Welcome to Below the Line. Below the Line is a monthly conversation that I have with a distinguished leader in the region or elsewhere. It's just exciting for me to be able to do that. This month, I have the fortune to speak with Dr. Larry Miller. Dr. Miller is the new president of Greenville Technical College, and I'm excited about it. Dr. Miller, I have a few questions, but I just wanted to really be a conversation. Yeah. So you grew up in the upstate of New York, upstate South Carolina, where we are right now, but you grew up in the upstate of New York and stayed there for your undergraduate, your master's degree, and your doctorate degree.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little about your upbringing and why you pursued these degrees and this career?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me as a guest. I've enjoyed being your partner for the past 3 years that you've been in this role when I was serving as our Chief Academic Officer at Greenville Tech. Yeah. And we're going to get into that in a little bit, but I'm really excited about the new role and the new opportunity to continue to collaborate with you. So, about upstate New York, it's a lot like upstate South Carolina. Okay. People don't know this. Everyone wears orange up there for Syracuse University instead of Clemson. Uh-huh. Okay, we're in the foothills of the Adirondack Mountains instead of the foothills of the Blue Ridge. Okay. So very similar there. Just the big difference is annual snowfall. Okay. So,
yes, that's a very big difference.
So I'm smart. I moved here, and I like the climate better. But it's interesting too. If you look at the history of where I grew up, we had probably one of the most technologically advanced investments in the world in the 1800s.
Okay.
That was the Erie Canal. Mm-hmm. That's why all those cities that I grew up in and lived in and trained in exist, because that's how far the horses could drag the goods on the boat every day.
Okay.
So that's why you have Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Utica, Albany, and then out to New York and the rest of the world. And so we had a rich advanced manufacturing history. Kodak, Bausch & Lomb, Xerox, all those great companies, Carrier, were based up there, and they all slowly left.
Okay.
It's interesting where we are here today. We're starting to attract and have attracted global investments. Right. But I also see the other side of that, so I want to make sure that we remain competitive here. I trained, just share a couple other details about myself. I grew up in Clinton, New York, where Hamilton College is. I had a graduating class of less than 100 students.
In high school graduating?
In my high school, yeah.
Mine was 99.
99, yeah, I think we were 98, so we have a lot in common there. But Hamilton had a huge influence on my life. Hamilton College is is a top 20 liberal arts institution. Colgate University is too. It's right up the road, 20 minutes from where I grew up. Even though I never attended Hamilton except for football camps, they did have a program called A Better Chance on their campus. So they brought students from New York City who were high achieving academically, who had some life challenges. They would live on campus and go to high school with me.
Okay.
That introduced a lot of new faces to the upstate community where I grew up, and I made new friends and new ways of seeing the world. So that was great, and it just got me to thinking about what higher ed can do and what kind of role it can play in shaping people's lives. I choose to go to UB, the University of Buffalo, in part to play football. I was excited to do that.
What position you played?
I was a nose tackle, and they were going Division I, and they were recruiting me, so I had fun doing that. I also wanted to live in a big city. Benny, it sounds like you lived in a smaller town too, so I wanted to have a different experience. So went to Buffalo, majored. I thought I was going to major in physical therapy because I wanted to stay with athletics. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, which I think a lot of our students have that, right? But out of necessity, I had to get a job. I wanted to stay there over the summer. I was tired of throwing hay for $4 a load. I knew there were better opportunities out there. So I started a business freshman year to stay in Buffalo. And then all of a sudden realized I liked business. So I majored in business and in finance. And then I sold that business, wanted to become a management consultant, had to get an MBA to do that, did that. So that's why I stayed on that business management track. And it was in my management program that I started to realize I might want to be a professor and a researcher someday.
Okay.
So I had an opportunity to work for Arthur Andersen out of that program. I took that, got to work in New York City, Texas on Fortune 500 clients. And it was during that time that I started to say, yes, I definitely want to go back and get a PhD. We relocated to Seattle for my wife's fellowship in neonatology. I got to work under the leadership of Paul Hill at the Center on Reinventing Public Education.
Okay.
He's a Rand Corporation fellow. And it was there that I brought my public finance and strategy expertise to private sector expertise to public education problems. We married those ideas. I decided after 3 years there I wanted to do a PhD, so I returned to upstate New York to SU because the Maxwell School is the #1 policy school in the world, and they had 5 education finance scholars, and that's my area of expertise. So even though it looks like I stayed in upstate my whole career, I actually went to Seattle to come back.
Now, how long were you in Seattle?
3 years
3
for my
years.
wife's fellowship.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So, as the new president of Greenville Technical College, just telling your story and your path, I can kind of see a lot of the correlation and why you are the new president of Greenville Technical College. You would take over for Dr. Keith Miller, who served a very, very long, distinguished record. No relationship.
No relation, yes.
And he'll retire in July after 17 years. What made you want to take on this job at Greenville Tech?
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to thank President Keith Miller for his leadership. 17 years is a long time in this role, and he's actually been a president for 29 years at 3 institutions. So an incredibly long career. I also just want to acknowledge when I got this role, the headline and the magnitude of it kind of hit me because I'm the 3rd president in 63-year history, so I've got huge shoes to fill. Those 2 previous leaders left me in a good position. I took this role because I'm really proud of the success that we've accomplished over the past 5 years in my role as Chief Academic Officer. National rankings matter. It's not why we do what we do. We do what we do to help students. But to go from unranked in online learning to number 21 in the nation, according to Newsweek, I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of our faculty and the collaboration we've had to accomplish those results. We're getting much better results than we used to. And we still have a lot of opportunity to improve. So I took this role because I saw how many more lives I could change and help change collaboratively with all the partners I have in the community. I love working, obviously, with the Chamber and you serving on that, also the United Way and many of the other organizations, the Greenville Area Development Corporation that I serve on. I think the sky's the limit here, Benny, so I'm thrilled to be here.
You know, I'm really excited about working with you in this role. You know, you and I worked very well together over the 4 years for me, and the first time I met you, you were there to, let's see if we can make it happen. So you definitely are a yes person.
Yes.
Not just a yes from the perspective of saying yes to everything, but how do we do things that's best for the state, best for our students, and best for our kids. In your role as Chief Academic Officer, workforce development was also a part of your portfolio. And you were instrumental in increasing the number of credentials awarded to about 238% in one calendar year. Let's talk about that a little bit. And you already referenced your Newsweek ranking in 2022 to the number 21 in the nation in 2024. So talk to me about
how we're getting there.
How you get there.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think there are a couple ways we've gotten there. And the ways we'll get there will change over time. So I'm going to talk about tools and systems, but really it's a system perspective. Okay. So you've got to set an ambitious goal. right? And it's got to be data informed. You've got to have a system in place where you work with others to accomplish those ambitious results, because no one can do this by their own. These aren't stroke of the pen accomplishments. And then I believe in having third-party partners to help us make that happen.
Okay.
So the 238% increase came about because we enlisted Franklin Covey and partnered with them on the 4 disciplines of execution. And we rolled that out as a college 2 weeks before the pandemic hit.
Okay.
And it turned out we thought we were launching an ambitious reform effort across the college, and then got hit and blindsided by this terrible pandemic that would have derailed us normally, but actually it kind of was fortuitous because 4DX forces everyone on the college to develop their own WIG, wildly important goal, and join a team and have a huddle and a cadence of accountability every week to talk about what you did this week to help achieve your wildly important goal for that team. That team's wildly important goal has to be aligned with the college's wildly important goal.
So it's building up.
It is building up.
Okay.
And it's about collaborating with your colleagues, breaking down barriers.
And you empower everybody.
You're empowering everybody, and I'm making a commitment. It's like working out, right? We were talking about this before we went on the air. The best thing you can do to keep a routine of exercise is form an accountability buddy, right? So I won't get up for my alarm, but if I know you're going to be there, meet me at the gym, I'll get out of bed to be there for you. So that same idea is there inside these teams. I'm making a commitment to the team to outreach to 5 of our students this week whose expected performance, according to our predictive analytics system, went down this week. So something's happening in their life. Our data is telling us this. We needed a system where people change their behavior, outreach to that student and say, what's going on? How can we help? We notice something's not right. So,
but sometimes that's a pretty big culture shift.
Yes, sir.
And I like the idea that you did a lot of training and development for your entire organization. How did you get buy-in? How did everybody come in and say, okay, we want to we're sold into this thing?
That's a great question. I think one of the ways that leaders do that, and it's maybe a cliche, but I think it's leading by example. Okay. So the whole college does this. It's not just something we do to certain levels of the organization, from president's cabinet who huddles every week all the way down to, any member of our college, our custodial team huddles, our facilities team, our food services team. Everybody's involved in it. So I think that's one way. Another way I think we got buy-in is we celebrated the success of our team. So we have an annual summit where we award our best teams with prizes, and it gives us a chance to celebrate the success of the college and helping out. Those are 2 ways. I think the third way is the huddle's a great way to communicate with each other. We like working with each other already, so
everybody I meet from Greenville Tech is extremely enthusiastic about their jobs, and they don't come to it just from their perspective. These are the experiences that I had with several individuals. They come to it how I can benefit the region, how they can elicit new partners to work. So I really appreciate that from your colleagues.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
That's the experience I've had. Now, Greenville Tech ranks first in the state for dual enrollment.
Yes.
So this is a continuous mounting of accolades in terms of being first, being ranked, being this. Talk about how important dual enrollment is.
Yeah.
And how did you get there?
Okay. That's a great question. First of all, dual enrollment is really important for our first generation students, our students whose families haven't had access to higher education before. And many are concerned in this country about the affordability of college. So if we can we used to charge for dual enrollment to some students, but not others. Bennie, you and I worked in higher ed long enough. We know we're full of acronyms and lots of rules that only insiders understand. And sometimes as leaders, we have to cut through that, right? So if you were a PIP student, PIP, dual enrollment was free. And if you weren't a PIP student, it wasn't.
Okay.
who knows if they're a PIP student, which stands for pupil in poverty? People don't know that.
Yeah.
Moreover, the threshold to be defined in poverty is really low. So folks who earn just above that couldn't afford the cost of dual enrollment for their students. So we sat down and we said with Greenville County Schools leadership and Dr. Royster, we looked at it and we said, how much is this costing us if the two institutions shared the burden? How much would it cost us to make it free for everybody? And it turned out to not be a large number. As I joke with Dr. Royster, I said, the answer made both of our CFOs a little bit upset, but made everybody in the community happy.
Yeah.
That was the right answer.
Right.
So we shared the cost, made it free, including books and inclusive access materials, and uniforms and equipment for our career and technical education programs. So we wanted to remove all those barriers so all families got the same message. This is free and available to them. We went from about 1,600 students in the program to over 3,000 today. And the share of our students, we started to change. So we saw we were underserving certain parts of our community. The students were underrepresented. And now we have increased those groups by 50%. So we saw growth in the underserved market and the most. And so we're proud of that.
So,
and just more broadly, I want them to get college credits now. More and more of our students are getting actual credentials, including certificates and degrees, while they're in high school for free. So I want them, to come to you in junior standing with no debt, right? And they only have 2 years left. They just graduated high school. They're 18 years old. By the time they're 20, they already have a bachelor's degree at a very affordable cost. That opens up opportunities to think about master's degrees and other professional development opportunities and careers that they may never have thought of before. We're changing their lives.
which is good. And,
Yes.
and that's what it's about, and that's what the collaborations are all about as well. So you have authored many education, finance, and policy publications. What topics are your favorite?
All right. Thank you for asking that
and
question.
also think
sir.
about which one is that seems most crucial in today's political and education environment.
Absolutely.
Okay.
My favorite one, please, any listeners out there, Google, it's called Policy Barriers to School Improvement, What's Real and What's Imagined. And it's my favorite paper that I ever wrote. We studied really successful leaders, and we said, how did you do everything you did to get where you are? And I was interested in their answers, but that wasn't the real crux of the study. After they answered that question, then I followed up and I said, okay, tell me the 2 or 3 policy barriers that if we could lift them today would take your performance and your student success to the moon.
Yeah.
What are those? And then we recorded all of them when we created what we called a policy barriers database. There are about 140 policy barriers cited by these top education leaders. Well, then we went and investigated each policy barrier cited. And do you know what the share of policy barriers that were real, meaning we could verify that this was a true barrier you could not?
25%?
You're right about on. 1/3 of them were real, and 2/3 were imagined. So a lot of times as leaders, we're building, cages in our mind, and we all know the work of Carolyn Dweck and others that sometimes our mindset is our biggest barrier to reform. And I want to give you credit here today because one of the barriers that we've had in this state is on reverse transfer. Okay? And so you and I sat down in a very early meeting.
Right.
And I said to you, here is the issue. I've got students who are transferring to you with a lot of college credits, but no degree. And sometimes they get to you and they're unable to complete here at your institution for life reasons. But they've earned enough credits that if those credits were reverse transferred back to my institution, they'd get a certificate or many times an associate's degree.
Right.
Well, if we do that automatically for them, because what student knows about reverse transfer? It sounds arcane and bureaucratic. If we did that on an automated system, we could help lift a lot more boats. And you said to me, what do we got to do to make that happen? I told you what we had to do. And what I really appreciate is your bold action. And I think we both agree on this. We made the default policy the right thing for students. So students are automatically enrolled in that reverse transfer
Yes.
process. They have the right to opt out if they don't want to do it, but the default is this is the best thing for them. And we have over 100 students getting degrees this year alone. I haven't shared this with you
I didn't know
yet.
that.
Yes, sir. And we think that number is going to go up significantly more. And I also just want to point out, we had one student that I'll never forget, a student who left us with 6 credits left in the Criminal Justice Associate's Degree program, came to you, working part-time, took another 4 years to finish their bachelor's degree. Had we had this system in place, this automated reverse transfer, they would have gotten their associates from us 4 years prior, and that person would have had a 5% raise for those 4 years.
Yeah.
And that individual had 2 young children. So I want to make sure that our system is designed to maximize the benefit for our students.
It
So
really
thank
doesn't
you for all
cost
of that.
much. Thank you
No.
for your enthusiasm and
Yeah.
leadership around that. And when we talked about that, and you brought that to my attention, and I was talking with my leader, Donette Stewart.
Yep.
And it's something that she's been wanting to do for some time, and just trying to find the right partner who was willing to be a part of it.
Yep.
And you have the clearinghouse that delivers on a lot of that, and it's just barriers to that. To your point, to your favorite article that we put in place ourselves.
Yep.
That are false. And what we were able to do with that was to create a partnership with the Technical Colleges of South Carolina in October of that year and sign an agreement that will participate with every technical college in the state.
That's awesome.
And so, and it's not an either or; it's an and. And
Yep.
that's the challenge that I think leaders get caught in, is saying that if this happens over here, we're going to lose something here. What we're doing are for the citizens of South Carolina. And the students that we serve, we know that life happens.
Yep.
And when life happens and they have invested that much time into their career,
Yep.
and to leave without a credential and without any degree is a tragedy. And so the opportunity for them to get that associate's degree just because they took 6 credits here and they left with 6 credits,
Yep.
and you all confer that upon them, takes them into the marketplace in a much more competitive way.
We're
And so
both.
thank you.
I think all 3 of us are winning
Yeah.
because we get to award the student a degree and count that. You do, and you count that, and the student gets 2 degrees instead of 1.
2 degrees.
So-
and they see the value of that
And so
while
do-
in school as well.
And so do employers.
Yeah.
Because employers want to see that if you were able to start at a community college, successfully transfer, and earn 2 degrees, if you and I employ a lot of people, we know that takes a lot of
Yeah.
grit to get there, and I want people with
Yes.
grit working for me.
Yes. Thank you. So I understand you are an advocate for economic mobility,
Yes.
recruiting underserved students, and champion cross-functional teams to achieve ambitious performance objectives. And I've read that a number of Black and Hispanic students at Greenville Tech has increased about 50%. Tell me a little more about
Sure.
that and those priorities.
So what I'd like to look at, I think in higher ed, we can hide behind a lot of nebulous goals or a lot of platitudes. And I really appreciate the Lumina Foundation. I'm always looking for those third-party independent partners. And they have set a goal that our Commission on Higher Education has adopted in South Carolina to increase the share of working age adults who have a college degree or credential of value, meaning that it helps you make higher wages in high pay, high demand jobs, from our current levels to 60% by 2030.
Yeah.
Now, we know that if we achieve that goal in a community, we increase the size of the economic pie. So the estimate from the chamber is that in Greenville County, where I serve, the economic pie will increase by $5 billion if we do that. So that helps everybody have a bigger share of the American dream. Right now, in 2009, our community was at 39%. We are at 51.4% as of 2023. So we're on our way to that 60%. But we also recognize that within the 51.4% results, there are subgroups of our population who have gaps. So those are the gaps you're referring to
Right.
that we're focused on improving. One way we help to close those gaps, the 50% increases you referenced to Black and Hispanic students, that's through our dual enrollment initiative. We have other initiatives ongoing right now to look at our first generation and our Pell eligible students and recruit more of those students.
Right.
A third strategy that we have is called Accelerate U. Accelerate U is a dual enrollment partnership that's looking at students in high schools that are served by OnTrack Greenville. OnTrack Greenville is run by United Way. Okay, and it's a program that looks at students who are less likely to graduate high school and much less likely to ever go to college. And it's an early intervention program that starts in 6th grade that helps them with attendance, behavior, and course success, the ABCs of learning, so that they have those opportunities as they get older. So we're targeting the 3 high schools that are served by OnTrack Greenville with daily bus service in partnership with Greenville County Schools. It all comes back to partnerships. And bringing them onto our campus. And I'm asking those students a different question. I got to share a couple details. One, students in those high schools, the data suggests that many of them work outside the home in high school. And on average, they earn 25% of their household earnings. So the money they make contributes to the family's budget.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. 25%, that's pretty large.
Yeah, and
for a high school student.
And I can relate to this because I grew up this way. I worked all through high school 40 hours a week. And so, as a first generation college student, I know what that life is like, okay? And so I want to give those students an opportunity by asking them a different question. Many of us have asked them, do they want to go to college after high school? They've told us no. They need to go directly to the workforce. So instead I asked them, do you want to go to college while you're still in high school and earn at least a credential, a certificate that gives you a much higher wage and a higher skill, higher demand job when you get out of here? And they're saying yes to that question. So we're bringing them onto campus. We're investing in our skilled trades program in particular. We've upfitted our HVAC and our industrial electricity programs. We invested $3.5 million this year to make that lab new with all new equipment. So this fall, they're going to come into a sparkling new space and have that opportunity. And I just want to close the loop and say this. I also need to talk to the parents. So any parents who are listening today, that is not a pathway just to that credential and that occupation. All of that training is transferable. You can then continue and stay with us, earn an associate's degree. Because of our partnership with Upstate Connect, with your school, they can still stay on a pathway to a bachelor's degree. They can stay on a pathway to a master's and even a doctoral degree. So the point is, this isn't a dead end. It's a different pathway that those options still exist for those students. And in fact, I would argue, sometimes we try to push students down the traditional academic pathway. It's not right for them at that time, but it may be 4 or 5 years from now, and let's keep them in a pathway where they learn at an appropriate way for where they are in their life.
I get it.
Thank you.
So, can you talk about how you work with Harvard Strategic Data Project to help raise student salaries?
So, yes, thank you for bringing that up. So the Strategic Data Fellows program at Harvard University is designed to help institutions increase their capacity for analytics and research. So we sent 2 fellows to participate in that program, and one of them conducted a study to make sure that we understood which of our graduates were earning high-wage, high-demand jobs, and then we use that information to expand the number of seats in those programs. And equally, if we had programs that were resulting in low-demand, low-wage jobs, we had talks with industry partners and, either the job offerings were increased, or we had to say goodbye to some of those programs so that we could redirect our resources and grow the ones that result in the economic mobility that we're here to deliver on.
I'm going to reach out to you. We have a partnership with Burning Glass Institute that we're looking at
Yes.
some of the same things and looking at like graphic designers. Can we add a credential to them that increase their salary in the marketplace by $10,000?
That's a great
basic
question.
type of credential, maybe an AI credential, some other type of credential. So you have the traditional graphic designer that graduates from our program, and you have that graphic designer that graduates with a credential that gives them a much more competitive edge in the marketplace.
That's smart.
So-
And we need to, and you host, the annual talent summit. And so I learn a lot from you at that event. So it's not just one thing,
Right.
but it's interesting when you give your employees, I know we're going to talk about leadership, right?
Uh-huh.
So what's a good leader do? A good leader says, what experiences do I want my employees to have so that they think differently, kind of like the way I do. And so partnering with an organization like Harvard and getting, a credential for my staff from that program really gives them a lot of confidence.
It gives them a lot of confidence.
Yep.
They think differently. They begin to recognize that they may be doing some things exceptionally well that others
Right.
aren't doing. And they are sometimes a challenge, but okay, we should be just doing some things differently.
Yep.
So
I'll also say I was shocked. It's kind of cool to see that, my highest earning program is a 2-year degree, starts at $72,000 a year.
Oh, wow.
So we're proud of that. I
It
mean,
is.
and so we got to get that information out. And I'll share one other thing with you. We invested in a tool that we're implementing right now. It's called Occupational Insight. And we take this labor data that we're talking about, we feed it into our student information system, and we will start to output it to students in the program. Because right now, I can't tell you, we don't report.
What is it called now?
It's called Occupational Insights. So
Okay,
I don't
insights.
report to our students. We give them a lot of data about the labor market. We tell them national wages. We tell them state wages. We tell them regional wages as they're figuring out what major and career they want to be in. Okay? But what I don't tell them currently is how much graduates from our program earn in our market today and at 5 years, because it's not just a question of starting wages. Some careers have lower starting wages but higher trajectory.
Right.
And so some students may want to choose that.
Very good point.
So we're refining that information. A better informed student creates a better higher education system.
So we're going to pivot and talk about leadership.
Okay.
And this podcast is entitled Below the Line for Purpose. Oftentimes as leaders, we lead with what we know and what we see, what we hear. But many times there's a lot at play that we don't know. And so leading below the line is really what is our tactical strategic approach to being able to lead more effectively with all the stuff that's below the line. So you talk about holding listening sessions. Have those been going on so far, or what have you heard, what have you learned that's going to help you as you step into this new role?
Yeah. That's definitely my plan to structure my listening sessions when I start on July 1. I have had the good fortune to have one-on-one meetings with all of my board members.
Okay. That's
So
good.
yeah, that's where I've started, and I structure those conversations in a positive way. I ask them for 2 strengths, 2 challenges, and 2 opportunities. And then I aggregate that information. And I think as a leader, it's important then to assess what you're hearing from folks, right? Are those strengths that you're defining as strengths, do I see them that way? Does the rest of the institution see them that way? What does the data say relative to other peers? Is that really a strength? And if it is, okay, now we're all in agreement on that. If we're not, let's get clarity on what our real strengths are. Same with challenges. I follow that same approach. and then the same with opportunities. One of my favorite questions that you taught me to ask, if I can share it, is, what's the biggest opportunity we have in front of us in this institution, and what's the number one barrier in our way of accomplishing it? And I love that kind of question. So I'm using a similar framework in those listening sessions. I think from there, I think it's really important to have a performance management system that starts with a strategic plan that's well thought out and that is focused on moving the big metrics that matter, because you can't focus on everything. And number two, you've got to have data on key performance indicators and key performance activities that are leading indicators that if we do all these behaviors now, it's likely that those lagging indicators will actually move in the direction that our goal says in the future. So I lean into that quite a bit, and obviously I huddle with my team, and we have great data information systems. So you're
very much a data-driven, which I love.
Yes.
A data-driven leader. You want to see the data to inform the decision, inform the direction, to even help you to figure out how to pivot.
100%.
As well. So how do you think team members would describe your leadership style? And how do you describe it?
I think they would describe me as data-informed, accountable for results, and collaborative in the process.
Data-informed, accountable for results,
collaborative in the process.
And
I also, one key thing, I don't use the data as a weapon.
Okay. Talk to us about that.
So we get the results. A lot of people in results-driven organizations will sit there and say, this is a meeting where you're going to get called to the mat for not hitting the goal.
Right.
That is not what we do. That's a call and an opportunity to give support.
Okay.
So don't be afraid of having, look, if you have results-driven targets, Benny, and you lead by holding everyone accountable to hit those results, come hell or high water, you're going to get low bars, low results. I want high bars, and then I want to work with people every day that say, I'm not getting there. Let's put our heads together and figure out a new way to actually get the results that we know we need to achieve.
And I believe that's very forward-thinking for leaders to recognize that. Matter of fact, the pace of change is so rapid.
So fast.
It's much faster than when I grew up. It's faster. And when I grew up, it was fast from my parent perspective. And it's even faster.
Yes.
And I was listening to a podcast this morning talking about AI and generative AI and how much time machines will be teaching themselves. And mathematicians, it's going to be a master's degree as a mathematician to be able to operate at a basic level. And helping to understand that. So as leaders, I think it's critically important to help our team members aspire. I think what many leaders miss, in my observation, they lead from tactics. They lead from saying, okay, I want you to do X, Y, and Z, versus leading from the big rocks. I think it's critically important for leaders to help people and help their team members see where we're headed. What is our destination? What are the big rocks for this organization? And the biggest challenge that I had to grow into as a leader is trusting the team members to create a path to get there. That's not my path. Okay? Because let's say my discipline, and this is probably going to be your challenge, and let's talk about that a little. My discipline was institutional advancement, and I knew it very well. I'm very good at asking for money. I'm very good at aligning those asks with priorities of the institution. So when I hire an institution advancement vice chancellor, I have realized that I have to be very careful not to prescribe that pathway for him or her to achieve the goals that I have. I'm just enamored by your background and your experience and your grasp of information. Who are you going to find to replace you, to give you what you gave Keith?
Wow, that's a big question. Well, first of all, I think we're in the middle of that search process right now, and I think we've got some we've invested heavily in developing our next generation of leaders at the college. So I'm hopeful that, we've got an opportunity for some internal or external candidates to get that role. I think you make a good point. Toby Stansel, I want to give him credit. He's a local leader and an executive coach, taught me the 5 most powerful words as a leader. You have that conversation and you hear both sides, and as the supervisor, as the boss, let's do it your way.
Let's do it your way.
I like that. And I think you and I both have to embrace that in the areas that we come from, in the areas that we have deep expertise. I will say I also, just by background, I was an RA. I mean, I've worked in student services. I was a college athlete. I also worked in institutional research briefly at Greenville Tech. So I've worked in staff and faculty roles. So that's a benefit. I've kind of worked all around the institution and in the private sector, so I feel like I can relate to my industry partners. I do want to share one other thing, though, that is part of my secret sauce as a leader. A PhD in public finance and policy. One thing that I've forced our institution to do is to bring finance information and student success information together in our systems to make decisions about maximizing ROI with everything we do. We are in a limited financial situation. I cannot do everything everyone wants to do, so I've got to make the right bets that have the biggest return to help the most students. And I can get into what those systems look like. It's called a portfolio management system, but we get very rigorous with it. And just one other tool that we have is called this impact tool. We do propensity score matching analysis. So it's quasi-experimental studies of what works for our students in student services. So for instance, we were about to close virtual tutoring because people thought it didn't work. We did a study on it, and we found that attending virtual tutoring sessions increased your likelihood to persist by 6.5 percentage points. Ground-based tutoring had the same impact. So it turns out those two methods of tutoring and coaching students were equally impactful. The difference on price, $13 per student served virtually, $77 per student served on the ground. So all of a sudden you go, not only are we not going to get rid of virtual tutoring, we were capping visits at 2 per semester. Why are we doing that? Let's increase that cap, let's remove it, let's increase that budget, and then reassess. So there's never a final answer. You've got to have a process of
continuous process improvement. Yes,
absolutely.
I talked to one leader, Don Bent. He was the first leader that I interviewed on this podcast, and he talks about how critical that every leader needs to have finance skills.
Yes.
And I think, regardless of what your career is, whether you're in the social sciences, the humanities, understanding finance of the organization, understanding how to think through financial modeling. Is going to help every individual make better decisions. And again, that's that data. So we're coming to the end of our term right now. And I want to ask you, do you have a hero?
Yes. Thank you for that question. So I mentioned I was a management consultant, right? And I worked for Arthur Andersen, and I was commuting to Dallas, working with a client there. That's when Enron hit our firm. So I worked there when
Enron. I remember
that. And so we went from a firm, bluest of blue chip firms, 80,000 employees, over 5 weeks to 0 employees. I was commuting there and also feeling a little bit, sort of disenfranchised with the whole business model because it was kind of driven on earnings only at the expense of everything else. And I thought life is more, there are other things in life that are more important than that. And I was reading David McCullough's book on John Adams. And as I was commuting in the plane, and I read about his incredible commitment to public service and also his values. I really admired him. I mean, there's some interesting history about him. He's one of the only 12 of our first 12 presidents who never owned a slave. So I admire that. He also died with a fortune of $100,000 positive whereas Thomas Jefferson died with, in debt.
Okay.
So interesting that the economic arguments around slavery that didn't pan out for him. So so that was one reason I admired him. The other reason is his depth of commitment to public service. I mean, this is a man who left with his son to become ambassador to France, and you get on that ship and you don't know if you're ever going to see your wife again, right? That's the level of all in. We talk about being all in. That's really all in and committing to your country and to public service. So I admired him. I wanted to be a leader like that. But moreover, I admired David McCullough, the author. And David found a trove of letters between Abigail Adams and her husband that no one had discovered before, and that was a large part of the basis of that book. He's also a legendary curmudgeon, so people didn't like his personality, but I appreciate his values, and they actually made that into a mini-series on HBO, and
I watched that.
Played by Paul Giamatti, which I think he's perfectly
He did a great
cast.
job for
Yes.
it.
And just one last thing. I'm in Naples working as the dean of a college of education down there. And I'm at the Golden Apple Awards, which is our annual event to celebrate great teaching. And who shows up but David McCullough? And I met him and I told him how his book changed my life. And I said, "Why are you here?" And he said, "Oh, we're just in town, so we bought tickets to this event because we care about teachers."
Oh, that's
So
nice.
what awesome values as a person. And I'm glad before he passed away, because I've read all of his books, that I got a chance to meet him. So my heroes are both of them.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I would not have expected that, but I'm not surprised now that you've explained it. But I'm here with Dr. Larry Miller,
Yes.
the newly elected president of Greenville Technical College. Larry, it's been an honor, and I'm humbled by the conversation, the time you spent with us on Below the Line. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm very excited about big, bold activities that you and I are going to do together in this new role. I can't wait to see what's ahead for both of us and our students.
Great. Thank
Thank
you. You've been listening to another episode of Below the Line.
The Below the Line podcast is brought to you by the University of South Carolina Upstate. Look for our monthly write-up in Greenville Business Magazine, and for more information, go to uscupstate.edu.